Okay, so what we learned in the last video is that when we're learning skills at work that are valuable in a wide variety of contexts, things like learning how to use Excel or learning how to use Stata or learning how to give a great marketing pitch, we're going to end up acquiring those skills at work the same way we would at school. We're essentially going to have to take lower wages now in order to earn higher wages in the future as a reward for our higher productivity. And to the extent that our boss is involved at all, it's only going to be as a provider of a non-wage amenity. In other words, our boss is only going to provide us with training to the extent that it's valuable to us and a cheaper way for our boss to make us happy than to just pay us more money. But how about if instead of learning skills like using Stata or using Excel, we were learning skills like how to use the weird proprietary mail merge software that our boss prefers to process all of the company's RJ17 forms? Or what if instead of learning Stata, we were learning the names and birthdays of all of the company's vice presidents along with their favorite lunch and coffee orders? In other words, what if we were learning skills that were only valuable at the employer with which we were working right now? Would we still have to pay for that knowledge and skill through lower wages today? Or would our boss end up paying for those skills instead? So to think about this, let's go back to this profit condition that we started with, right? Let's think about the firm's objectives again. So what we said is the firm's present discounted value of profit, pi of h, is going to be the profit that they earn in period 1, MRP1, minus their costs in period 1, which is going to be W1 of h, plus the cost per unit times h, right? Plus 1 over 1 plus r times the profit in period 2, right? Which is going to be MRP2 minus W2 of h. Right? And what we said was, in order for it to be worth it, for the firm to pay these costs of training us now, it either has to be the case that our wage in period 1 is less than our marginal revenue product in period 1, or that our wage in period 2 is less than our marginal revenue product in period 2. And remember, the argument that we made before about why this couldn't be the case was that in period 2, when we became more productive, that would increase the wage our firm would have to pay us in order to keep us from working for somebody else. But now, the skills that we're learning are only useful at our current employer. So if we think about what a competitor would be willing to pay us, a competitor would only be willing to pay a wage to us in period 2 that was equal to our marginal revenue product if we hadn't gotten any human capital investment at all, right? Because that human capital investment is useless if I'm not working for my current employer, it doesn't raise the value of my outside option at all. It doesn't increase the wage that I get offered by another firm at all. And so as a result, we're going to think that it is in fact possible for the firm to offer us a lower wage in period 2 than our productivity in period 2. And if that's the case, remember the reason that we were willing to accept a wage below our marginal revenue product in period 1 was because we expected to get paid more in period 2, right? To get paid for that additional productivity. So if our firm isn't going to have to pay us much more in period 2 than they would otherwise, right, without the human capital investment, we don't have much reason to accept a lower wage in period 1. So the fact that the investment is only useful at our current firm is going to increase the likelihood, right? It's going to make it more possible for the firm to pay us less than our productivity in period 2, and less possible for the firm to pay us less than our productivity in period 1. So given that, could we have a situation where this is completely untrue and we're only left with this? In other words, is it possible that our firm is going to end up paying 100% of the costs of training us in the first period and then take 100% of the benefits of our new productivity in the second period? So let's imagine that happened. Let's imagine that we had W1 equal our marginal revenue product in period 1, regardless of training, and W2 equal our marginal revenue product if we hadn't gotten any training. In other words, let's imagine that the firm pays 100% of the cost of training us and then receives 100% of the benefit of our training in period 2. So if that was the case, when the firm was maximizing profits, they would be maximizing their profits in period 1 plus the discounted profits in period 2 and because our wages wouldn't change at all with a change in human capital, their profit maximizing condition would just be given by minus C plus 1 over 1 plus R times the change in productivity with the change in H equaling 0. In other words, if the firm was bearing 100% of the costs of training me, but was also going to get 100% of the benefits, they would train me up until the point that the discounted value, that the change in marginal productivity, is going to be equal to the costs times 1 plus R, right? And what we would say then is, in the same way that in the general human capital case, the level of investment would depend on the cost to the firm of providing that investment and the benefit to the worker of getting that investment. Here, the level of investment would depend on the benefits to the firm of receiving that investment. In other words, firms that really benefit from high levels of firm-specific human capital would invest more. Firms that benefit less would invest less. There's just one problem with this. Right? There's one problem with this possibility here, where workers are going to be paid exactly their marginal product in period 1, and then paid exactly their marginal product in period 2. And that is that if this was the case, a worker wouldn't have any reason not to quit this job. So if we paid the worker MRP2 of 0 in period 2, that means that this worker is getting exactly the same wage at this job as they would at any other job. That would also mean that they're getting paid a lot less than they're worth to the company, right? So this would mean that W2 would be much less than what the worker is actually producing for the firm. The reason that this is a problem is because this means that any little thing that increases the value to that worker of leaving is going to cause them to walk away from the firm and take with them a whole bunch of valuable investments that the firm made in their skills, right? So you've got a cousin in Boca Raton who says that the weather's really great and that you should join them. You quit your job, you move to Boca Raton, your company loses, right? You get in a fight with a coworker and you don't want to be there anymore. You quit your job and the company loses. On top of that, beyond the fact that you might want to quit your job, the fact that you're getting paid way less than you're worth to the company means that you can get away with a lot of bad behavior without getting fired. Right? You can show up to work late, leave work early, steal all of the copy paper and other office supplies, and your boss is just going to have to put up with it, right? Because they're paying you so much less than you produce for the firm, and because it doesn't matter to you if they fire you, right? If they fire you, you get another job where you get paid exactly the same amount. So, practically speaking, because of the fact that the job market is a little bit uncertain, because of the fact that the firm needs to give the worker an incentive to stay at this job if they're going to invest so much in their skills, practically speaking, the firm is going to have to pay them a wage in period 2 that's higher than the wage they could get at some other firm by some amount. And that amount is going to depend, right, on how likely it is that random stuff is going to happen that's going to change their value of being at the firm. So we'll need W2 greater than MRP2 of 0 to give the worker an incentive to stay. What that's going to mean, though, is that the benefit to the firm of training their worker is going to be less than what we just worked out. That means that the benefit to the firm is going to be less than 1 over 1 plus r times the change in MRP2 with respect to age, because we're also going to be increasing the wage as we give that worker more and more and more firm-specific training. So what that's going to mean is the firm isn't going to be willing to pay 100% of the cost of training their worker. They're not going to be willing to pay W1 equals MRP1. So are we doomed? Does this screw everything up? Yes and no. So on the one hand, this means that we're not going to be able to get this investment that we had before and have it be profitable. On the other hand, the worker now has a reason to want to get invested in, right? The worker's going to want to learn, want to have a job where they learn how to process the RJ-17 forms and learn the lunch orders of all the vice presidents, because they know that getting those kinds of skills, right, becoming more valuable to their specific boss, is going to increase their wages in the second period. So as a result of this, W2 greater than MRP2 of 0 allows W1 to be less than MRP1. In other words, the fact that the worker is going to get paid more as a result of the fact that they've gained these skills means that the worker can be paid less in period 1 because they're deriving a benefit of gaining those skills. So what we're going to conclude is the costs of investment in firm-specific human capital are going to end up being shared between the worker and the firm. And the amount of the costs that are borne by the worker are going to be a function of how much incentive the firm needs to give the worker to stay in period 2. Essentially, how much bargaining power all of this firm-specific human capital is going to give the worker in period 2. In other words, our conclusion is going to be that we're going to end up with a wage in period 1 that is that is greater than MRP1 minus CH, but less than MRP1. Right? The worker's wage is going to be in between what they would be willing to be paid to invest in general human capital and what they would be willing to be paid if they weren't being invested in whatsoever. So in the next video, we're going to think through the implications of what it means that in period 2, the worker is going to be paid less than their marginal revenue product.